Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the day. This is Experiential Technology, and I'm delighted to say we have three fantastic speakers with us this afternoon. We have Asa Kalama, who is a VP Executive at Walt Disney Imagineering in charge of creative and interactive experiences. We have Yiannis Cabolis, who's Electrosonic and is a Director of Technology Innovation. And we have Martin Howe, who is the CEO of Dapper Labs. And in fact, Martin is today going to be your chaperone through this session. See what I did there, Martin? And he's going to be asking the questions. So I'm going to hand over to Martin now. And I hope you enjoy this session. And of course, any questions, do put them in the chat box on the right, and we can ask those at the end of the session. Cheers, then.
Well, thanks, Charlie. It's a real pleasure to be part of this session. And hello, gentlemen. Good morning to you both, the other side of the pond to me right now. Experiential technology. I think one of the things we want to discover today in this session is what really is experiential technology. I'm sure there's thousands of definitions. I'd start with a broad one that is simply experiential technology are technologies that can, with the right creativity and content, enhance in some way the visitor experience. It's a very broad definition. I think that's kind of a platform for us to jump off with. So I'll start with you, Asa. So hello, Asa. Bright suns to you.
Bright suns.
Bright suns. Thank you. I looked up earlier today. It was 2 years ago that we met on a similar forum with blooloop V Expo, when you and I discussed the amazing experiential technology that you and your team developed for Smuggler's Run at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. That used real-time content delivery, live interaction to deliver unique experiences for every guest. Each guest gets a slightly different experience and story based on their interactions. Well, I'm sure things have moved on since then, since we've met in your world, and I'm sure they never stop, right? So I wanted to start with you first to get your views on the subject of those core technology threads, real time and personalization. So my question is, to what extent do you think that real time, live interaction, and to varying extents that personalization can enhance the visitor experience beyond what you've already achieved?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for me, at its core, it's about helping our audiences and our guests feel seen. I think there's been a little bit of an evolution of what we mean when we say personalization. I think, once upon a time when we said it, it had more to do with like taking psychographic or demographic information about a person and expressing it in an interaction, right? Like what's your favorite color? What's your name? How can we reflect that back to you? Which was, I think, the beginning of allowing people to participate in experience, whether it be an attraction or immersive walkthrough, and get the semblance that, the experience, the system knew that they were there. Yeah. I think in more recent years, the sort of definition of sort of personalization has sort of evolved and grown to incorporate not only literally, who I am in the real world, but as we make stories and experiences to become more participatory, where audience members are no longer just audience members, but actually now part of the story. Personalization means, who do you want to be in this story world? How do you want to be seen? Do you want to be a character? Do you want to be yourself? How much do you want to participate? In what way do you want to participate? And all of that sort of implies an incredible amount of flexibility in the design of whatever that experience ultimately is, right? Inherently, it can't be a linear series of triggers, but rather must be something that is necessarily responsive and sort of enabling all of that. And I think part of what has allowed that sort of progression from, again, merely a reflection of who I am in the real world to who I want to be in the story world, so much of it has been enabled by technology, by our ability to, understand where you are in an experience and what things that you're interacting with, our ability to, on the topic of real-time media, be able to actually change dynamically what we're presenting to you based on how you're interacting. So really I see our ability to, unlock these more deeper and more meaningful relationships with entertainment experiences entirely enabled by, technology.
I like that first simple statement that I think probably means so much is people want to be seen. I'd like to dig a bit deeper. Is it they want to be seen feel that they're being seen and understood by the experience, or they want to be seen by other people in the experience, or want to be able to share those experiences afterwards outside? And just like to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, a little bit, yes. I mean, I think to some degree, I think with the advent of, social media platforms, etc., our relationship to the world, I think, has certainly changed pretty meaningfully, just in my own lifetime in terms of what our expectations are of how we relate to the world. And I think there are all these incredible opportunities for us in our daily lives to express ourselves and impact not only the immediate circle of people that we know, but also, broader communities beyond that, that when guests come to an entertainment experience, they carry with them that same sort of expectation that, they are important, right? They have value. They are meaningful in the world. And their entertainment experiences, should be a reflection of that, should value them for who they are. And again, I don't always necessarily mean this is about, complete and total, narrative transformation to say that like everybody in every entertainment experience, right, needs to be a character or truly needs to be part of a story. But I think it's more about, it's more about the entertainment experience appreciating the guest as much as the guest appreciates the entertainment experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting threads that you've already laid out there, and we'll try and pick on one or two of them a bit later on if time allows. Thank you. Yiannis, it wasn't 2 years ago that we met. It was actually just over 2 weeks, I think, at IAPA, and a subject we got into really quickly that I think is a common interest of ours, alongside motorbikes, of course, is the ability of technology to understand space, the three-dimensional world around us. Can you share your thoughts on that, please?
Certainly. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here and meet with you again. Experiential storytelling calls for fusing technology platforms. There's all sorts of terminology that goes along with that, whether it's the interoperability among the various platforms and how much they can work together in unison, I should say, not just work together. It's a sort of an art form, right, that it's performed by very unique groups in our industry. What we have found out through the demands that we have from the experiential architects and content creators of bringing technologies into spaces to enable experiential storytelling is that we have as I said, the art of technology platform integration, and then to respond to the personalization, but we need to deploy various types of polysensory technology, which is not enough just for it to be an I/O point, an I/O node, but it has to be almost completely ingested by the complete experience and the space. And by that, what I mean is, at the very early stage, where we start working with some potential 3D models, we need to properly deploy those technologies, whether we're talking about rangefinder, layers and interesting ways of communicating with signals, RF signals, and so forth between the individuals participating in the experience and the hardware delivering parts of the storytelling. All that has to be done in a way that is completely transparent. But the end result, and it becomes very interesting because of where technology, as technology advances, is that now we can have real-time responses of the space, not only, as I said, as an I/O trigger, I don't like this, I like that, a gesture, etc., or pointing, looking at something and making a selection, but also in terms of the personalization. Maybe the environmental controls, maybe the inclusion and way to communicate to specific guests because of where they come from, how well they understand, or how fast they're picking up the way they want to participate. So that's what we are. That's what we're looking. That's what it's interesting. There is a lot of data sharing that has to take place. We need to rely on systems that operate within the space of the actual attraction, but that would basically make it only a one area where activities can happen. To go to a further total experience, right? We need to tie also all the auxiliary spaces, the retail, the food and beverage, areas where people are gathering, and then tie all that to the personalization, the guest personalization about, changes of plans, waiting for others, where are we meeting, where are we going to go, what type of services, and so forth. It's not as simple as just an I/O node.
Yeah, like we heard on an earlier session today about tying in the retail experience as well, so that becomes personalized and kind of experiential. So this idea of combining these technology pieces, real-time interaction, personalization, and I think the terminology you use is kind of space awareness. I talk about that sometimes in presentations I do. I call it 4D and me, that three-dimensional space, the four dimension of time, and then integrating me, assimilating me as much as I want the system to. In time, in terms of kind of milliseconds, to synchronize these technologies through to minutes, hours, days, weeks, and even years, through conversations I've had, that idea where you engage your audience and make it experiential, not just during the visit, but beyond, having that whole branding engagement process. So with all these technologies, and I think some of the threads you started to touch on, Asa, what can you perhaps describe a user journey, what that might look like in a park or an attraction of the future? Asa, perhaps you go first.
Yeah, well, I mean, something you just touched on that I think, is profoundly interesting, right, is sort of that notion of persistence, right, which is certainly a thing that is much easier to accomplish today than it might have been maybe, even sort of 10 years ago. And I think certainly becomes part and parcel of the expectation of a guest in a truly sort of participatory or reactive experience. The more dynamic and reactive and engaging an experience might be, right, the more capability I think the audience starts to confer on the system, right? And so along with that comes this expectation of I went through this amazing walkthrough experience and I encountered all these incredible characters and we went on this amazing adventure. Because that, for me, that becomes a very real memory. It becomes a very personal experience because it happened only for me and only that one time. I start to expect that, that experience of that system, when I come back a week later or a year later or 3 years later, right, remembers me and remembers those exploits, right? And I think not only is that a benefit to the audience, right? Because again, it just sort of further reinforces that idea that, this this fictionalized adventure that I had is grounded in some semblance of reality because it obeys the same rules that, the rest of the world does. But I think it also is really an exciting creative and storytelling tool as well, right? It becomes a very different endeavor to design a entertainment experience that is meant to be interacted with once and only once and is the same every single time versus picks up right where it left off from the last time, right? There's all of this prologue work, right, that you've already done that you can then leverage in a subsequent interaction, which I think is incredibly exciting and certainly something that we've known has always been magical for forever, right? A very small example of this is I'm sure we've all heard stories of a cast member on Main Street, for instance, having an interaction with a guest as maybe Mary Poppins, and then many years later running in to Mary Poppins again, and oh my, how you've grown, and how have you been, and how's your brother? Like, all of that feels so incredibly powerful and meaningful. And so I think we've but yet begun to start to scratch the surface in terms of what it means to enable persistent relationships, not only between guests and characters, guests and environments, guests and stories. It gets really complicated really quickly, but it also gets super exciting.
It does. That's a really interesting thought, isn't it? It also raises the challenge that if you don't meet that expectation, if you set an expectation that there's persistence and awareness and this experience is somehow kind of sentient or anthropomorphic, or has kind of an awareness to it, if you go back and it doesn't, you might be somewhat disappointed.
That's absolutely right.
So we may be setting ourselves up for a bit of a challenge there, but it certainly adds a lot of complexity to the design and implementation then if we're heading in this direction. Are we ready for that, Yiannis, do you think?
Yes, I think we are. We have, and that's part of the magic. And for people like myself and Asa and yourself, because I know we've had these discussions, what's exciting about what we do and how we build partnership with manufacturers, pushing that envelope and using the exact same. I like to refer to it the same way as chefs. In any chef kitchen you go, you will find the same ingredients. However, each result is different because of their abilities and how they use them. So I like to use that analogy because that's exactly what happens. We have manufacturers that produce wonderful products, and then they need that spark that comes from ideation sessions that we have with creative groups about how can we reach that goal of the experience. And then we're able to bring better results. I mean, currently, we have the ability of creating within the same waveform, if you can imagine, a wave distribution, individual beams that can be extremely precise and dynamically sent to guests. So what Asa was describing, the system being aware that you had that prologue, you have seen a part of it. Perhaps while the rest of the guests are having an experience, you as a group, you specifically might be hearing something different, something that adds more to that excitement and differentiates your experience in that second or third time of your visit.
Yeah, one thing we now acknowledge and lockdown helped us to appreciate is being together in these experiences so valuable, and that notion that when you leave an experience that you only then you realize the person next to you had a slightly different personalized experience than you did, and saw things or heard things, experienced things that you didn't. I think there's some magic in there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think the other piece of this that, to the point of complexity, begets complexity is, I think one of the fun creative challenges that we now face is if you have an inherently dynamic experience that changes and evolves and is unique for every individual and maybe persists sort of over time, the process of testing such an experience becomes exponentially more complicated, right? It's truly like, rub testing an open world video game, right? There's so many amazing combinatorial things that can and will happen, and surely far more than you ever possibly imagined. Vetting and ringing out and making sure that all of that, incredibly complicated technology that Yiannis was talking about, handles every conceivable edge case is, it's a very exciting challenge that I think we're sort of presented with. And then there's also, I think, a related piece of that, which is, so many in the video game world, right? The world has, many games have moved towards sort of a live service model, right? Where, the stories continue to grow and evolve, and there's a team that, manages the story and continues to publish new content, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're, rapidly approaching a place where in the sort of physical experience world as well, that becomes more and more important, right? It's not, it can't be overstated just how much work is required to maintain all of that, to not only be continuing to push out new content, but to be pushing out new features, to, understanding and discovering a completely new scenario that nobody had ever contemplated when all of the testing had done during test and adjust, because, you never thought a guest would have done X, Y, or Z, and, patching the experience. It's very exciting. But I'm the creative guy. I'm not the engineer, so it's exciting for me. I'm sure it's maddening for all the devs.
It's exciting for us as well.
Yeah, I think you've hit on an important point there. I think that the scalability is bewildering, probably, really, when we start to put these into play. And testing ultimately will be real time with guests who are, and if you can make them part of the experience of reacting and feeding back these edge cases that you wouldn't be able to launch a park ever if you wanted to test every perceivable edge case, I guess, in these scenarios. So yeah, that will be interesting how operationally that is dealt with, and I think your gaming analogy is a good one. Yiannis?
That's where the partnership comes into place, because for example, I like to reach extremely often to adjacent to our segment industries. So, for example, borrowing a digital twin engine. So this way we can basically be testing in real time or making those adjustments while testing is happening. And by the time we open, it's not beta testing. It's you are really up there, because the demands increase exponentially. But at the same time, we have to look at what were the challenges. I mean, you roll the clock back 10 years only, and you look at your cell phone and what it was able to do. And then today, you can basically leave your office and take your office with you in your pocket, literally. So all that creates opportunities at least in my head, and applications and edges where we can do better what we like to do.
Yeah, you mentioned digital twins. I find I jump onto that subject every time somebody asks me about the M word, the metaverse, and I was tempted to avoid the M word today, but I have a question that I'm intrigued by, and I'm sure I won't get the answer I'm looking for, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, Asa, when will Disney build their metaverse?
Oh, the internet's breaking. Oh, I'm losing it. No, I'm just kidding.
Next week, did you say?
No, I mean, I think I'm gonna zoom out a little, which is to say, I think the Walt Disney Company is about to celebrate its 100th year in operation, which is an absolutely incredible feat. And at the heart of it, right, I think what has allowed the company to sustain for so long is this beautiful, I think, symbiosis between storytelling as being the heart of absolutely everything that we do, and a open and eager willingness to embrace the latest and greatest in technical innovation in the service of telling stories in brand new ways. And so I think, as we have done for the last 100 years, we will continue to try to take advantage of, new platforms, new technologies to tell stories that people want to hear in the places where they are, right? So I think we will continue to, over the next 100 years, allow guests to discover their favorite characters and favorite stories in new and interesting ways.
Yeah, I think that wherever they are is an important statement too, isn't it? It's wherever they are. If you can continue to engage with your guests over that kind of persistent brand engagement over many days, weeks, hours, years, then you are going to be doing it wherever you are. And things like digital twins and augmented overlays onto the real world, all of those things that are actually with us now, I guess inevitably will play a part in that in ways that we haven't probably imagined properly yet. I think we're seeing very early examples of that, driven by one sector of the market and what their definition of a metaverse, a real experience will be. And I think as more people adapt that, certainly people at scale like yourselves and many others, I think we'll start to find a happy place that really starts to blend seamlessly between the physical and digital.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to throw a couple of other things on my mind that I'd like both of your views on, please. And I'll throw some words out there and perhaps you can both comment. So what do we think about wearables and where we're heading with wearables? Yiannis?
Yes. So wearable technology will become essential more and more. The reason for it is because it's, number one, personalized, but it also provides a level of inclusivity that non-wearable technology does not. It can be tailored, fully tailored, and fixed for an individual. And that familiarization takes away sometimes the unknown of the human to machine and machine to human interaction, which is going to increase exponentially when we start bringing into play extended reality, mixed reality, the metaverse, which, as you said, is a combination of various types of platforms, of technology platforms. So I think it becomes extremely important. It's also extremely important when we go all the way to the beginning of our segment today, talking about the way we elevate the experiences and all this additional sensory that we need to have in order to have full awareness of the space and the guests bidirectionally.
Yeah. Asa?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, as a creative tool, incredibly exciting. And I mean, obviously wearables take many forms, but I mean, even if we just talk about, things that I wear on my face, to your point, Yiannis, about, mixed reality experiences, I think, again, it starts to unlock a whole new domain of storytelling for us. And it allows us to do things that we love to build things physically, but there are certain things that defy the laws of physics, and technology, like for instance, a set of wearable glasses, all of a sudden allow us to do so many of the things that we, talk about, that we imagine, and, finally realize them and bring them to life for our guests in a really powerful way.
So let's jump a little bit further down the line. What about implants? What do you think about those?
Well, I don't think that we're necessarily there yet. It doesn't mean that we're not going to be there or how fast we're going to be. The beauty about technology is that it does not, it doesn't go increase in specific increments, but in leaps. So that could potentially provide the proper, for example, interface when we're talking about polysensory technology, something beyond the iconic and echoic, which we have extremely good control with the current technology. But how about, interfacing the sense of taste, smell, touch, and so forth? That can be of interest, I think.
Yeah. Would you?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, I mean, I think it's really fascinating, and I think, I think personally for me, I think where that idea is most interesting is in enhancing the physical world around you, right? I think taken to its extreme, right? You could imagine, implanted memories of amazing experiences that you never really had, or, contemporaneous projected events into your brain, right? But I think the idea, as Yiannis touched on, of like giving you superhuman ability or unlocking different senses or activating things in ways that we couldn't, but blending that with the physical world is really interesting to me.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I would be at the front of the queue for some form of implants. I quite like the idea of making things even easier for me to interact with things and not have to do it through the devices we do. So if you're looking for volunteers at any time, just put things into haptics. Didn't talk about haptics yet, I don't think, really, have we?
Well, haptics come in a variety of forms, and I think that actually the proliferation, if we want to call it, of electric vehicles and self-driving vehicles actually tie into that in a completely different way, in the ergonomics way, right? If I have an electronic vehicle having, for example, a physical button to control the volume control of my sound system is a little bit kind of off, right? I want the touch screen. So I reach for the touch screen. This way I have a feedback of where I set the volume. It's still at 10 and not at 11. So it's a sort of thing that I think will become extremely, extremely important. But we're talking about entertainment and experiences, and we have to be, I think, aware that when we look at the overall set of realms, the entertainment, the educational, the escapist, and the aesthetic side of realms, now those technologies and how we perceive an experience instead of just a lecture in a learning environment, or an experience instead of just being narrated a story, that becomes extremely, I think, important.
Yeah. Asa, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the tactility of experience is such an important part of all of it. And I think the more we can activate that sense, I think the more tangible, no pun intended, I think some of these experiences can ultimately be. I think certainly as it relates to, as Yiannis was sort of intimating, like screen-based experiences, I think, I'm an old school guy and I love the feel of a, mechanical button or switch, but if I can't have it, right, still giving, the user a sense of, meaningful feedback feels sort of really important. And then of course, I think there's all sorts of really fun sort of novel implementations of, haptics that aren't purely about, touch-based interaction with, displays or information, but, wearable haptic suits, as a mechanism for providing feedback in a virtual experience. I think there's a lot more fun exploration that's sort of yet to be had in that space.
Yeah, it seems that there's some questions coming in. We'll jump to those shortly. It seems that there's still a vast array of things yet to do, and technologies coming at us at quite a rate of knots that we can utilize to do these things. That's exciting times ahead, it seems, isn't it? A question for both of you then is, in the future, if you had a magic wand, or if one of your friends does, as I'm sure they do, what of those technologies would you like to bring forward and have in your hands today that you could implement on these things that we're talking about that isn't quite there yet, but you could make use of today? What would that be?
Would you like me to address this first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. To me, the polysensory side of things, being able to trigger more of the sensors in our amygdala, would be the most important, I think, evolution on the human to machine and machine to human interaction. Will require leaps in terms of the way we deliver. We could deliver or package this type of technology, but to me, I think that will be the most important. We're doing very well with the iconic and the echoic. We need to start inching more the other way.
Yeah, good point. And Asa?
I would take for reals volumetric holograms. It's the thing that we always, in every whiteboard session, we're like, if only we had a
that hologram thing, the real one.
Yeah.
Yes. So then you bring real characters into the 3D space, and they're all digitized, and they're there amongst you, and add some magic haptics, then they can touch you, and then okay, good. We'll wave our magic wand and wish that one along. Thanks, gentlemen. I've got a million more questions, but not a million more hours. So perhaps we'll bring Charlie in to help us just curate some of the questions that have been coming in as we've been talking.
Hey guys, thanks for that. Hey, that was absolutely fascinating. As you say, Martin, I think all the audience, we could be listening to that for a lot longer because there's so many questions and so many interesting topics raised. Implants and wearable tech, it's all great stuff. And one question you asked reminded me of Muhammad Ali in his early Cassius Clay days. If you look on YouTube, there's some fantastic video of him swaying away from the punches, and it's a real thing of beauty. And I thought when you asked Asa about the metaverse, he gave the most articulate and beautiful reply about storytelling, and didn't answer your question, which is ideal. And absolutely, it's going to be amazing to see what Disney do with the metaverse. But I fully understand, Asa, that storytelling is the key at Disney, and the tech, in a way, is kind of secondary, isn't it? It's all about the story and the history and so on. So that's all fantastic stuff. So we've got a number of questions coming in now. First one from Thomas. Thank you for sharing all this knowledge and experience. How do you ensure that a customized experience feels real and genuine rather than feeling like just a technical trick? In other words, how do you make people suspend their disbelief and not poke through the technical magic? So Yiannis, if you go for that one.
Well, on the technology side and certain parts that we touched upon through this our session today, I think that it's not, you don't just throw somebody in a box and you say, here you go, you're going to experience this and it's going to be same or better than life. You need to escalate. And I think we all learned from Disney the way they treat the story, where the storyline starts. The scenic pieces, everything is part of that story, and you transpose the individuals into the world so you can deliver the messages. On the technical side, we're going to do the best with what we have available and require testing and then additional testing, as we said, to make sure that the goals that the specific attraction is trying and messages is trying to deliver are actually done in the most elegant way as possible.
Fair enough. And Asa, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually just touched on it, right? I think at the heart of certainly everything that we do, right, is it's grounded in story. We have the utmost respect, reverence, and appreciation for all of the incredible technologists that make the magic real, but then we work really hard to make sure that nobody can ever see it, right? And so I think the trick to making sure that it feels genuine and authentic and not like a trick is all in the intentionality behind the story that you're trying to create and the experience that you want to deliver to a guest. Now, it's not to say that even everything has to be super hyper dynamic, reactive. You just need to make sure that as a storyteller, as a creator, right, you're very clear on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, the emotions that you're trying to elicit, make creative choices about the format of the story that you want to tell, and then pick the right technology to support it. But I think it has to start from this place of, how do you want to move people?
Cool. And Martin?
It's been said, but I think one of the other points is making sure there's a process for leaving the other world behind. People don't switch from one zone to another and just jump into an immersive space and be in it. There's a process of leaving the outside world and the other thoughts behind, and that takes a little bit of time, and it is a journey, which you both talked about.
Cool. A question from Luke. To reference your point about magical and spontaneous moments with cast members over the years, Asa, is there a risk that an over-reliance on technology could make those less likely? Amazing potential for all this technology. Thanks for the great panel. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the key there, right, is to make sure that I think the key word there is sort of reliance on technology, right? Like technology is an unbelievable, amazing, enabling tool, but it's something that, again, is in the service of trying to create these incredible, magical moments. And in every meeting that I'm ever in to sort of talk about creating a brand new experience, it's all organized around not only our guests and what do we want to create for them, what emotions do we want to elicit, but equally important is the role of our cast members in bringing it to life. It's our single greatest asset in any of our parks are the human beings that bring it to life, that interact with our guests, that make those magical moments that last a lifetime. And so we work really hard to make sure that we're also preserving those relationships, we're enhancing them wherever possible, and we're making it as magical and as meaningful to be the storyteller as it is to be the audience.
Okay, cool. We're of course looking at innovations in the future essentially here, but there's a question here that kind of looks at the past. It says, did the pandemic kill off any technology or at least set it back? I mean, for example, touchscreens, the obvious one, but any other, Yiannis, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there was obviously a time where everyone was extremely careful to the surfaces that they were going to touch. So obviously the response from the technologists is what are other ways we can have and we can provide you to provide that UI, the user interface, so you can interact with with what you're trying to interact with. However, I think that it also served really well other aspects. Through that process, we found ourselves looking a lot into what sort of devices individuals carried with them to come into a space that required interaction. And could we transfer the GUI to be available on their device? This way, nobody has to clean anything, you're not touching anything that you haven't touched, and so forth. So through that process, though, we got more reliable Wi-Fi and network systems. We went to the notion of, let's what edge computing does, which is basically I have a central location that serves multiple locations, and then that data and the content is optimized on the far end device. So in essence, I think it helped to escalate almost in a hyper curve certain developments that occurred over the pandemic.
Okay, cool. Martin?
Oh yes, good question actually. I'd say printers, hopefully. Printed ticket, printed maps, all of the printed collateral that was necessary of the past, I think is quite quickly dying away now, and it's user adoption that has driven that in a good way. So I think that would be one.
Right. Cool. We should move along. We're getting questions coming in. From Michelle, for guests that are more captive audiences, like on a cruise or Star Cruiser or Disney Vacations, for example, do you envision conducting more live testing with these groups for new experiences and the technology powering those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, before we launch any guest-facing experience that involves any level of interaction or participation, we do typically years of playtesting, right? Long before the building is built, long before there's even a server stood up with actual software running on it. We test and iterate and test and iterate and test and iterate. Obviously, when it's early on in a project, a lot of that takes the form of, paper prototyping or, man behind the curtain or woman behind the curtain facsimiles. And as technology comes online, we sort of iteratively test, and invariably, right, the engineered version of the experience is always slightly different than the paper prototype version of the experience. So there's another sort of like iterative loop. But yeah, to the point of the question, long before the first guest ever experiences the sort of soft launch of any of our products, there's been years and years and years of behind the scenes testing.
Okay, cool. Question from Klaus. He says, I cannot help think about the core of loyalty programs, which are about having people feeling heard and seen. Do you think there might be a pitfall for those operators who try to mimic the recognition of individuals and guests realize that it's not them, but patterns being recognized?
It's a really good question, isn't it?
I paused then for a moment because I don't fully understand the question, but I was thinking that you three would.
Maybe. I think it relates to the comment we made earlier, is with vast skill, complexity, budget, time, testing, and all those things, these will be amazing experiences. Without those, if you try too hard and reach for the stars and fail, people will quickly spot the cracks in the wallpaper. So I think there's going to be a clever balance between saying, what can I deliver as an organization, as a business? What can I deliver as a valid experience that genuinely does this task, and don't overstretch? Because I think if you do fall short, the gaps will be very apparent and compared to other experiences that people can readily access.
Cool. I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. First of all, what changes have you seen in guests' expectations for interactivity since COVID? Yiannis, you want to take that one?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have everyone always wants something bigger, better, more immersive, and so forth. And coming out of COVID, I think that guests wanted to see something that it's relatively new, better than what it was before. However, integrate better different type of user interfaces, whether they included, eye tracking, which is a fairly advanced way of interacting with a surface, or perhaps just body language and so forth. So we have had requests for both, and we have implemented requests, this type of requests.
Cool. Martin?
Yes, I think we haven't quite seen what's possible yet. Every year you go to IAPA and say, what's new? And on the show floor, there's some things new, but actually what's underneath that you don't see is what's coming. So I think the real impact of COVID and the benefits of the innovations that have happened in that kind of quiet time are going to be next year, 2024, a few years' time. I think we'll will be amazed and look back and say, wow, what a transition that COVID caused. I don't think we've quite seen the pinnacle of it yet. It's quite what I'm trying to say.
What would you say on that, Asa?
I mean, I think certainly as the world started to open up again, we saw a very clear hunger and thirst to get back into exploring immersive experiences. I think people were and are, looking for that point of connection and shared experience with other people. I do think one of the interesting sort of flip sides of that, which I think has changed behavior somewhat, and it'll be interesting to see how this continues to shake out sort of over time, is we did get very familiar with and comfortable with the idea of connecting with people that don't live near us, right? Our sphere of, regular touch points of interaction or community has sort of grown sort of geographically. And it's sort of interesting to think a little bit about how you might experience, something physical also with somebody who isn't in the same place as you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Right. So the final question, it's good kind of rounding up kind of question. Matt says, a great discussion. What are the best themed experiences the panel have enjoyed? Ones which managed to wow you even when you knew most of the magician's tricks? Alternatively, which experiences provide excellent way markers for the industry? So, Martin?
Oh, that's not fair. I think the one that springs to mind is Rise of Resistance. I didn't know how it worked. I looked behind the scenes on most of it. But oh my, it's the first time I saw it working. It was the first time I wrote it, and I saw content I hadn't seen before. And it's a long experience full of wows, and knowing how the technology works makes it even more amazing. So I think that's right up there for me.
Cool. Yiannis?
I just have to agree with Martin, and also tie to this that it's an experience that it's extremely well put together, beginning to end. The whole land basically is part of the experience, and there are technology interactions throughout, and I think that that's very unique with what's comparable that opened during this hard time.
Cool. And Asa?
Yeah, I just to build on that, I would say I'm also equally enamored, obviously, of Rise as well. And I would also say, I think what Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser is doing is pretty profound in terms of giving guests an opportunity to interact in a way that so few experiences really offer. And the level of coordination and technical complexity, I mean, to your point, Martin, about like knowing how something works, it is truly astonishing and a testament to some pretty incredible engineering and creative work by a really, really powerful team.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Yiannis, Martin, and Asa, it's been really great to hear from you. I really appreciate you, spending time with us and speaking to our audience here. This is the final session of the day, so do all come back tomorrow, to all of you in attendance. And we're going to say goodbye now, but immediately after this, we'll be announcing the winners of the Experiential Technology Award. So thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.
And now, the winners of the Experiential Technology Innovation Awards 2022. Third place to MIT Museum from Blue Cadet. Second place to Giving a Voice to Puppeted Walk-Around Characters from Bodrio Interactive LLC. And first place to Feel Every Beat Haptic Suit Experience at Mighty Hoopla Festival from Unit 9. Congratulations to all the winners and to everyone who entered the Experiential Technology category.